What is a futures bet? How do you place them? Should bettors spend their time and energy specializing in this type of bet? Everyone wants to know the pros and cons. We're here today to dive deep and break it all down. I'm Joe Holka, and when I'm thinking about futures bets, the first thing that instantly comes to mind is that a lot of people prefer to sweat their wagers for a longer period of time. A little bit more bang for their buck in a lot of ways, and especially considering the high payouts connected to these long odds in particular, it's no surprise that futures bets are among some of the most popular sports betting types out there. And either way, if you think you have an edge in predicting sports well in advance of the results, futures betting may be for you. Now, there's a couple of ways to look at it right off the bat. Futures wagers are most commonly placed before the season or an event begins, but they can be placed at any time throughout the entirety of the season or event. Obviously, these odds are changing fluidly based on gameplay results on more of a day-to-day basis, but maybe you don't care about any of that. Maybe you just want to sit down, cheer for your hometown team for an extended period of time with just a little bit of skin in the game. Futures can be some of the most exciting sweats that exist down the stretch once playoff time arrives. Here's how it works. Future bets are paid out based on the exact odds when the wager is placed with the bookmaker. So for example, if a bettor wagers $100 on a plus $1,500 futures bet that cashes, they'll actually receive $1,500 plus that initial $100 that they put up in the first place. So often one of the major incentives for future bets is that the long shot odds and payoffs that come with them can be extremely high upside. So while they're obviously unlikely to hit, some of these future bet odds can extend past plus 10,000 on a major underdog over the entire season or a long shot in a tour event on the PGA. Also, something we should probably touch on is the juice, because typically this is much higher for a futures bet versus a standard bet. And the primary reason for this is that sportsbooks normally like to spread out their liability on the standard wager by manipulating money lines in order to balance the handle on both sides. So sitting back is collecting that 10 to 15% juice, also known as the VIG, regardless of the result of that event. So for futures in particular, this is achieved by setting the odds so that the implied probabilities is somewhere between 110% or even higher. I've seen this get as high as 120 to 140% in some cases, which definitely helps ensure that the book realizes their profit and acts as more of a protection in many ways for them. It's not all bad for the bettors. I will say that the structure allows for some of these really high increased payouts, at least the opportunity of having a big score on them from some of these underdogs. Let's talk about some pros and cons when it comes to futures betting. And the first pro, we did just touch on it, but futures bets simply allow for a higher upside payout than standard wagers or even most parlays for that matter. And trust me, there are few things more satisfying in the betting world than cashing a long shot futures bet. Just it's so exciting watching your team have a shot down the end that you thought was undervalued a long time before it actually came through. So it's something that I hope everyone experiences at some time. The second pro, futures bets are incredibly fun if you're trying to kind of implore proper bankroll management and you just don't overextend yourself on these before the season or before an event. Wagers that are made prior to the season, of course, we just don't have a lot of concrete information available at that point. It can certainly benefit more skilled bettors, also just some more engaged sports fans that are paying attention through free agency, trades, that sort of thing. Again, for lack of a better word, the bang for your buck following along the season for an extended period of time just unfolds a whole new level of interest and can help you diversify your portfolio of action. In terms of some cons when it comes to futures betting, to me, the number one biggest issue is also tied to the same duration that makes it a fun bet to place. Because the fact is, if you're trying to put up your money for an extended period of time, it also means that you aren't able to use those funds for other wagers for that entire length of time. So that's why I brought up bankroll management before. There's nothing worse than going a little bit overboard with futures bets only to wish that you had more of your budget to play around with on a nightly basis in season. So opportunities can come out of nowhere. You just want to be liquid enough to take advantage of them if you want to be a successful sports bettor. And the second con is that futures bets are incredibly tough to win. I mentioned that lack of information before, but there's a reason that bookmakers are comfortable offering these long odds. So let's talk about an example on how things could potentially go wrong. We've talked about a lot of good things so far, but in a hypothetical scenario where you submit a handful of futures bets on the Dallas Cowboys, for example, you bet on them to win the Super Bowl, the NFC East. You also correlate your bet by wagering on Dak Prescott to win the league MVP award. Leaving aside the difficulty of a team actually winning the Super Bowl, there's a ton of things that can occur that would absolutely torpedo your futures bet. So what if Dak Prescott actually gets injured? all of your bets at that point are likely losses, just to give one example. So if you're just overextended to those type of bets on the futures side, it really can limit what you're doing all season long. Let's dive into some of the best ways to place futures bets, because in terms of the types of opportunities to look for, sometimes that's even more important. So the first one that instantly pops into my head is something that's absolutely crucial, is just reacting to news quickly. So when news breaks on a major trade, injury, whatever it is, something that changes the landscape of the entire league, maybe just changes the landscape of a division, we have to be willing to make those decisions quickly, act instantly before the odds makers have time to adjust those betting lines so that we can actually lock in a better futures number. It's just something that is a lot more favorable in the long term, especially if you can get out in front of a big move that you know is going to be coming. It can make a huge difference. And we discussed building a portfolio of bets a little bit earlier. The next benefit of futures may not be super exciting, but it can also help you lock in profit through what's called a hedge. So as an event wagered on moves towards a conclusion, basically just hedging provides bettors with an opportunity to lock in that guaranteed profit at the expense of maybe losing out a full payout from the original placed wager. Another way to place plus EV futures bets is the same advice that I'll always give to people for any type of wager, is just to shop around. Try and find that best line and the best price for your future bets, because odds are quite fluid. Sportsbooks often have pretty varying numbers if you're willing to look and dive deep, especially in the futures market. This can be true. And this is a simple way to help ensure that you're getting the best number of each of your wagers. And it might not seem like a big difference for one bet, but if you do this for 3, 4, 5, 6 bets, just compounds into giving you a much better chance at hitting at least a couple of these numbers throughout your career. So it helps to boost your overall profitability in the long term, and that's always what we're worried about. Something I need to personally improve on a little bit is just betting futures during the season, not just prior to the season, right? You're always trying to improve your line that you have, or at least improve your odds of at least pushing some of these bets that might be a little bit more of a long shot. So to some bettors, they actually prefer to wait and see how a team or player begins the season before investing in that future bet on them. So I do think that it's just, reality is opportunities can change drastically from when the bettor passed on maybe a future bet prior to the season that you still want to get some access to as the season is going on. So the key is just to remain flexible, continue stacking up opportunities as the season goes on. Let's touch on some of the more popular futures bets you can make, because each sport definitely has a little bit of nuance that we should discuss, and we should start at the top. The NFL drives pretty much everything in the betting world, so naturally the Super Bowl champion is quite a popular futures wager to make. Here's a look actually at the top 5 NFL futures odds to win the Super Bowl this year. Make sure you let us know in the comments who you're betting at these odds. Would love to see someone hit one of these if we go back and look at it in a few months. We're definitely big hockey fans here at Line Movement, so I want to talk a little bit about my favorite type of futures bet to place, the Stanley Cup champion. This year, it's going to be even different because of all the things that are happening with the 2020 NHL playoffs. I think one of the sports that's really interesting from a futures perspective is almost always the MLB. So the World Series champion, it's always interesting because you look at the top 5 MLB futures odds to win the World Series this year. What should stand out right away is that just the MLB historically is skewed towards some of the more popular franchises and cities, and that can present some serious value for underdogs and long shots, especially in a season like this year, 2020. It's just the Wild West, right? There could be a shorter season overall, which is just simply less opportunity for some of the top teams to distance themselves from the pack overall. A couple more futures bet types that come to mind that I forgot to mention before are just these events, right? So March Madness, the majors on the PGA Tour, these are some of the more fun futures experiences that I've ever bet on in the past. Just the build up overall for these events just can make for an awesome sweat, especially if you're able to secure some really nice positions beforehand. The last type of futures bet I want to mention is actually a lot of fun as well. It's the end of season awards. So maybe you have a specific lean on who you think is going to win the NFL MVP this year, or you just feel really that the NBA Rookie of the Year, for example, is wide open and you want to take some shots on some underdogs. That's definitely something that can make a lot of sense. Like other futures bets that we've talked about today, the odds for each player can just fluctuate throughout the season just massively as the public kind of has a little bit more information at their disposal. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're new, you're going to want to hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss anything along the way, just like these videos right here. But be sure and check out all of our sports betting content over at linemovement.com. See you guys next time.